Okay, Mentour Lawyer here. I'm sitting with one of the jurors that actually served on the Markel murder trial. I have the privilege of having you here, and I appreciate it very much. Thank you again for the service that you did for the community. Serving on the jury is very time-consuming, it's very stressful, it's a hard job, so thanks again for doing that. And more importantly, thank you so much for agreeing to doing this interview. We're going to basically have a conversation about how the jury trial worked out, how serving as a juror, how it was like, basically from the beginning to the end of the trial, to the deliberations, which is the part that I guess most people want to hear about. I have some ground rules that I set to help you out and to protect your privacy. Number one, your image is not going to be shown. Even though you're going to be speaking, so people will be able to hear you, but there's no image of you. We're not using any names for you or for any of the jurors who served. And also, if anytime I ask a question that you don't feel comfortable responding to, you can just tell me that, and that's fine. And if at any time you say something that you want me to remove, tell me, I'll stop the video, we'll just delete it and go from there, okay? All right, so first of all, again, thank you for agreeing to do this. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I am a college-educated woman between the ages of 20 and 30, and I am a mother. That's pretty much it.
Okay. During the jury selection process, were there a lot of questions, specific questions asked of you?
Not of me specifically. So, as you know, the selection process took 3 days.
Yes.
And in the very beginning, they seemed to be grilling people more individually. And so I think towards the end of the process, by the time they got to my group, they weren't asking as many individual questions, the usual affiliations with law enforcement and that sort of thing. And so we all answered it honestly to the best of our ability, but not so many specific questions for me.
Very good. Were you able to watch the initial parts of the jury selection where the specific questions were being asked?
I was, yeah. I was there for all of it.
And I understand that there were, I think, 300 people, I think, that they had selected originally. Maybe it was less, I'm not sure, but it was a big number.
Yeah, as I understand it, there were over 700 summons that were sent out. I don't know how many people were actually asked to be at the courthouse, but I know that it was a lot of people that they whittled down from.
And so you were somewhere in the middle of the large number of people. So initially you were not one of the people. So I guess initially they started the first 12 or the first 30 or something like that, right?
Right. Yeah.
So you were in the next group?
I was at the very end.
At the very end of the second group, third group?
I was the last group.
The last group.
From.
I see. Overall impression about jury selection. I understand that this one was obviously very long. And a lot of it probably feels like a waste of time. But did you have an impression about the case or about the attorneys during the jury selection?
The questions that they asked were very telling. The defense attorneys, Mr. Zangaday in particular, was concerned with everyone's view on hard evidence versus circumstantial evidence. And one question that he asked that sticks out of my mind is whether we believe in mercy. That was something that seemed to be very important to him, understandably.
Sure.
Yeah, we were told that it was a murder trial. Georgia Kappelman asked repeatedly in several different ways kind of how we felt about the death penalty and whether that was something that anyone would be willing to give if it were appropriate. And so all of us who were selected are not completely against the death penalty.
Right.
There were some people in our group who, we differed on whether we thought it was appropriate for certain cases or not. But that the death penalty questions, the idea of mercy, and circumstantial evidence were all the most important questions.
Nothing case specific, like for example about issues of disputes during a divorce or I guess a very nasty divorce. Anything about that came up in the jury selection?
No, actually it didn't, which is kind of surprising in retrospect. No, not that someone may have asked whether we had been divorced, not my group specifically,
right.
but a different group. They may have asked that at some point, but my group was not asked that.
Yeah. So not a lot of questions overall, even for the other groups, about this whole issue.
Right.
Okay. What about religion, about Judaism, how you practice? Did that come up at all during jury selection?
Nothing specific to Judaism. I know that there were a couple people who spoke about their religion during jury selection, but it was always kind of in relation to whether they felt the death penalty was appropriate for certain cases.
Yes. Okay. And who were the attorneys doing the jury selection? I'm assuming Georgia Kappelman for the state, and then Mr. Zangane for Mr. Garcia. Was it Ms. Kawas or DeCoste for Ms. Magmalora?
DeCoste for...
DeCoste.
Yeah, we didn't hear Ms. Kawas speak until opening.
The opening, yeah. Okay. And I'm assuming that at least initially during the jury selection, you felt that the lawyers were very competent and eloquent and everybody was doing well. I personally thought that all of them were good lawyers.
Yeah, I think that they all worked very hard.
Yes.
At what they were doing.
Okay. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Okay. Were you surprised that you were selected as a juror?
I was initially just because of the large number of people.
Sure.
Ultimately, it wasn't surprising that they chose significantly more women than men. Obviously the idea being that women are less likely to choose the death penalty.
And the composition of this jury was 10 women and 2 men.
That's correct.
And then there were some alternates, which I don't recall their genders or...
There was one male and one female alternate.
Okay. And they never got to...
No.
Because I don't know that somebody was excused, but I think it was one of the alternates.
Yes. So one of our alternates got sick and was sent home. The other alternate stayed through the trial and was dismissed for deliberations, but then they brought that alternate back for the penalty phase.
Right, just in case somebody couldn't go through with the penalty phase. That's correct. Right. Do you think that there were questions that should have been asked of you that weren't asked in jury selection?
I think the divorce question is a very significant one. I think that whether anyone had been through a contentious custody battle, whether anyone had been through a divorce, that those would have been good questions to ask, and probably the religion question as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, especially about the divorce issue, because there's no way that anybody can justify what happened to them Markel. But I can see some people that might feel some empathy for the position of the Adelson family, especially because of how the divorce was handled and the things that I think Mr. Markel was writing in his papers on divorce, and we'll come back to that later. But obviously, there's no way that anybody can justify what happened. Yet, I would have asked, if I were doing jury selection, I probably would want to get some idea from the prospective jurors about that issue.
You would think that. I think that what happened at the very end of jury selection, I don't know how many people each side was allowed to eliminate. But I think everyone was just very tired, and I think the judge wanted to get on with it, and so I think that's kind of what happened.
And by the way, obviously in the way jury selection works, you have what is called peremptory challenge, and then you have for cause challenges. And I'm just going to very briefly talk about that. So basically, each side gets a certain number of people that they can strike out. They can use it on anybody except that if if it's a particular gender or race. And the other side questions whether this is some kind of discrimination. They have to explain why they're using that on that person. And then obviously the for cause is, people have said something that shows that they may have some bias, then they can strike them. So that's how it usually works.